I've had a couple people request for this to be recorded, so I'm going to record it.
Okay.
And I'm going to share my screen really quick. Let me ask first, between the two of you, do you guys currently have any investment properties, or is this something you're wanting to just have better knowledge of to talk to clients, or what's your situation as far as investing? Like, obviously we're all passionate about investments in real estate, right? But I'm curious what your guys' goal is.
It's and in this case.
Okay, both. I love it. That's perfect. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to share my screen really quick. If you guys cannot see it, please just very casual environment here. So feel free to just let me know you can't see it. Do you see understanding real estate investing?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to jump in. We might have a couple more people join, but I'll just admit them into the meeting as the time goes on. So this is a very simplified class in helping people understand the many ways that we do make money in real estate. There's a lot of people right now that are very hung up on the cash flow portion. And so my goal is to educate home buyers and agents in letting people understand there's so much more to just the cash flow on a monthly basis on how you make money in real estate. So, and all the pros and cons as well. So today I want to first talk about a couple of the general rules, and I'm not putting this in presentation mode just because on my next slide, I'm going to do a little bit of typing. So the biggest thing, the few things that we like to mention to anyone and everyone when it comes to buying real estate is it is not a get rich quick. And there aren't those that will actually make you money. You hear about a lot of those. And I even just talked to a client today that's like, oh, I said, okay, so you told me you had about 10,000 in savings. And she says, I gave that to my friend who's working on doing a flip. So she's like, I'm hoping to get that back soon, you know, but that's just kind of it's just, we like to look at these as long-term investments, right? So I truly believe that there's never a bad time to buy. I tell people to buy when you can, because it is so much easier for you to time a refinance in the future if you're not happy with the rate than it is for you to perfectly time a buyer's market in whether it might be, you know, you're worried about any number of things, but there is so much more advantage to you to get in when you can, especially early, and let that property grow for you and build your wealth for you over time. So I always tell people to let's talk about the pros and cons and buy when you can. Don't fear high rates. That's what I was talking about a minute ago as well, is you can easily time a refinance easier than you can perfectly time the purchase market, which a lot of people are saying to me right now is I'm just gonna, whether it's to buy a primary or to buy an investment property, they want to time the market. The problem we see with that is there's always frenzies, right? Because everybody listens to the news and they all think, oh my gosh, they say that there's going to be a bubble that's going to pop, so I'm going to put everything on hold. And then they realize, oh, maybe that's really not the case. And they actually talk to somebody in the industry, and then they realize, oh, I probably should have bought a little bit ago when I had seller concessions and I didn't have to pay over appraised value, or I didn't have multiple offer situations, right? So like, that's where I tell people is if you find the right property, buy when you can. I don't believe there's anyone that has a beautiful crystal ball for what the future holds. So it's hard to have a real perfect forecast on what the future holds. But what I can tell you is if you buy real estate, you're going to wish you would have bought 20 years ago. You're going to wish you would have bought, I mean, that's my husband and my situation. We wish we would have bought 5 more properties in 2010 and we didn't, but you know, we'll just buy them now, right? So never sell real estate unless you're improving your situation. You're either buying up or you're diversifying, is my suggestion there. Right? This is a big one. Buy properties in areas that are well diversified and supported with businesses from many industries. So as you might scan every property in the state of Utah, you're going to see some affordable properties in the Vernal area. So the problem with that is the Vernal area specifically depends on well, there's probably a few more, but they heavily depend on one industry, and that's the oil and the mines. And so what we don't encourage is for you to put all your eggs in that basket, because if there's a crash in that economy, we saw this happen in 2008 with Detroit, right? They all depended on one industry. So number one, your renters can't pay, and it just affects your equity growth and everything like that as well. So don't depend on one, which that's also why so many companies come to Utah, and we do have such great equity growth because we have such a diverse businesses and job opportunities here. So think about owning real estate as a business. And I have a suggestion here, because I am a person that gets very emotionally attached to just people in general. I'm a relationship person. I love people. So for me, I wanted to be able to treat my real estate investments as more of a business than I was prior. And so I ended up getting a property manager, and that allowed me to have that step back to where I wasn't so emotionally attached in their situations and wanting to, you know, have some leeway in rents, or, oh, it's okay. So that's helped me a lot. And we'll talk more about that as well. There's going to be ups and downs. So we know that with any investment, we know that with any business. Now is always a tough time to buy. So I think that this is kind of the mentality that a lot of us have. So when I look back in the properties that I've purchased over the years, when I bought the home, I was like, holy crap, this feels like a lot. How are we ever going to afford this? What if this, what if that? Oh, it kind of feels scary, right? Like it was uncomfortable. But now, however many years in the future from each property we've purchased, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so stinking glad we bought that when we did, right? So once again, real estate is a fabulous long-term investment and a lousy short-term. And then don't fear the negativity of cash flow. So I'm going to go into that here in just a minute. So this is the section where I do want a little bit of comments from you guys. So you can either put it in the chat, let me pull up the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I just want to hear from whether it's your own feelings or feelings you're hearing of others. What are some of the risks that you're hearing people have to invest in real estate, whether it's a primary or it's a strictly investment property? What are some of the fears that you're seeing people voice to you? Any?
So this is Elsa. So what I've experienced is people listening to the media. And today my friend told me her son put his wish to purchase his first home on hold because he believes, I'm not sure how he got his information, but he believes that the prices will drop 40% this year. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So listening. Wow, I can't type, you guys. We'll say not industry professionals, because that's where one of the big frustrations for me comes as well. Is I talk to buyers all day long, and this is a big fear of theirs. They're worried about what the media is telling them. The thing they don't look into is, or even think about, the media is reading a script that someone has given them, and they're just bad mouthing, but they're not industry experts that are providing the information. That's what's so frustrating for me. And Robert said in the chat, fear of another 2008 meltdown. Yes. Okay. And then another COVID-like eviction restriction. Yes. Any others? I know that negative cash flow is a huge one. That's strictly for investments, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Is there any others that you guys want to go over? Or any others that you've been hearing about or that you feel yourself? There's no wrong answer. So now let's talk about how to mitigate these risks. How are we going to? So number one, oh, there's already a one there. Listening to the media, not industry professionals. For me, this is why I'm doing this class, and this is why I do a lot of classes, because I do truly believe that we have to get ourselves out there for people to get good information. If you are an industry professional, you need to show up as the expert and share good information, share good data, not just, I talked to, and I even was coaching a lot of real estate agents for a period of time. And one of the most common things I would hear is the market is so crazy. It's so crazy, which that is true. But what does that mean? What more information can you be giving these people as to why it might be an incredible time to buy, or how great your investments in real estate have been, right? So like, let's get ourselves out there to share good information. And a big platform for this is social media, which I know a lot of people don't want to share or be on social media. But there's plenty of ways. I think one of the big things is making sure you're having good conversation, having a good reason to reach out to people and talk to them about some of their fears. Don't be afraid for them to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm so scared. Oh, and I think that prices are going to drop, right? Well, here's the deal. The reality of prices in Utah dropping 40% is so minimal. And you can explain to them that that's not happened since 2008, and explain to them the difference of what things are like now versus what they were like then, right? Especially when it comes to mortgages. I mean, people feel like they're giving their firstborn child plus a blood sample after getting a mortgage, right? There's reason for that, because we don't want to have another meltdown that we had before. So this one I'm going to say is professionals sharing facts and good information. And again, there's going to be fears, just like when I bought my houses, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so expensive. But again, in the future, you're going to be so glad that you buy. So fear of another 2008 meltdown. Yes. So this is a great time to explain to people the differences. So what are some of the differences you guys know of that are different now than what they were back in 2008? And there's a lot of differences here. And if you're not sure, just let me know and I'll share with you the things that I know and the reasons that I tell people. Okay, I'm going to share some of the ones that I have. So in 2008, we had a massive, we had too many homes and not enough demand. So we had a lot of homes and we didn't have buyers for the homes, right? So that's why you saw a lot of builders, especially development builders, who had built a bunch of spec homes. And then when the market went the opposite way, they lost, and a lot of them had to shut down their companies and didn't, survive through 2008 because we had way too much supply and not enough demand. The other thing is we were allowing stated income loans at that time, which means people were able to just say things like, oh, hey, I make $80,000 a year. And I'm like, awesome, great. They make $80,000 a year. Now there is so much that goes into verifying income, verifying stability, verifying their job history and everything like that. And those are good things. There are things when it comes to getting a mortgage that is frustrating for people because it is a lot. But I just tell people from the very beginning, you're going to feel like I'm asking for a lot. And here's a good list to kind of give you an idea of the things that I'll be asking for. But there's always going to be more. And it's just to protect you, to make sure that we don't get you into a home that you can't afford. So that's a huge part that was horrible back then, right? You had all these people buying homes they absolutely could not afford. I think our job stability is so much better now. We have even more diversity in jobs than we did then. We've had so many tech companies move in from other states. We've had a ton from California. We've had a ton from Oregon, Washington, all of our neighboring states. They have moved their headquarters to Utah to provide more jobs, but they also, I think, realize we have a lot of people that speak multiple languages here, and we also have a stable economy. We did not feel the impacts of 2008 in Utah the way that a lot of other states did. So we really have held pretty strong over the years. So fear of a 2008 meltdown, I think that just pointing out, I mean, we have a major shortage in homes still. We have such a high demand and not enough homes to be bought. And so it's completely opposite, right, than what we had in 2008. So let's just share the good and share facts on how things are different now versus then. Okay, eviction restrictions. This is a big one. So, and there was a lot of frustrations did you have any issues with that, Robert, during the COVID time when you weren't able to evict?
Excuse me, I didn't catch the question.
Oh, sorry, you're okay. Did you have issues with your own properties and not being able to evict during COVID?
No, fortunately.
Yes, same. I didn't either, thankfully, but I do know that was a frustration, right? They put basically this law out there for all of us landlords that we can't evict our people no matter how terrible they are. So that's one thing that I would say that's a harder one to combat. I would be surprised if that were to come out again. However, one of the things that I will tell you is I've had a property for many years, and I had this family of renters, and this wasn't COVID time, but they were terrible. And we had to go through the eviction process, and I didn't have a stinking clue what I was doing because I was self-managing my property. I didn't know what hoops I could jump through. I didn't do property management for a living, so I didn't have the option. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so having a property management company for me has made that a game changer, because that is what they do for a living. They do know the ways to jump through the hoops. They do know the eviction process. And so property management has been a game changer for me. As far as
Can I
evictions
just say,
go.
oh,
Yes, please.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is also, so until November, I was actually working for the courts, for the district court,
Mhm.
and eviction still happened. So there is,
They did.
oh yeah, and it was, I mean, it was just one more paper that the landlords or their attorney had to file, and that was pretty much it. And I can share the link if someone is interested in having that, just
Yes,
from
that'd
the
be
court's
helpful
website.
for sure. That's
But
super
yeah,
helpful.
so
Because that's the thing is, I heard the same thing. I knew that there were evictions happening, but I knew that people had to know what they were doing in order to make that happen. And that's where I know my property manager has an attorney on hand all the time. They also have an ironclad agreement that all of my renters sign. So that's where I'm like, I didn't know what I didn't know. So if I would have been a landlord that was self-managing at that time and had COVID issues with my renters, I would have been in a big, problem, because I didn't know what I didn't know. So thank you. I did know that there was those things happening, but I'm not sure how. So that's really good to know that there were things happening. But you just had to know how to do it, right?
yes, and I think again, this was probably just one issue where the media just blew it up, out of proportion, and there was always a way to get around that, because like I said, I worked there, and the process really didn't change much for us working there, and I was at the biggest courthouse in Utah, so
Wow, that's helpful. That's super
yeah.
helpful. Thank you for sharing, Elsa.
One of the
Yeah, so maybe that's one answer you can give to people if they bring it up. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you.
picking up on the comment about the media blowing things out. I mean, let's face it, New York and California and Illinois, they were horrible on this. I mean, they've always been bad, but I think that's a piece of information for a lot of people looking to invest in Utah.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, thank you so much for adding that. And then negative cash flow. Let's talk about all the ways to make money in real estate. So cash flow, so we're going to talk about the rewards, right? There's risks, there's rewards. Some risks, they're bad tenants and all those things, which to me, that's where property management comes in as well. So I want to talk about your return on investment. So I am going to put it into, oh, darn it, why does it do that? Let me just skip ahead. Okay, so let's talk about how much you invest in a certain property and what your return on that investment looks like. And this is the most simplified way that I've ever been able to teach this, because it just makes the most sense this way. So I want to talk on the left-hand side. This is as if you were buying a property that is strictly for investment purposes. So we are going to use purchase price of 400,000, interest rate at 7%, 25% down, which is $100,000. Okay. So your investment going into this is $100,000 because that's how much you're putting out of pocket into the property. Okay. So this is how our monthly payment breaks down. We've got principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and our total payment. Obviously, some of these numbers are estimated because we're not specific on a property. And then when we made this presentation, my team and I, we decided to just use the 22% tax bracket, which means if you're married filing jointly, and that's up to 178,000. So we felt like that was pretty fair. So let's talk about your return on investment in the 4 ways that you make money in real estate. So the first one is cash flow. Okay. So the way that we calculate cash flow is you have your rent of $2,400. Your payment on this, your total monthly payment is $2,260.91. So you're cash flowing $139 a month every single month. Okay. So we take the 139 and we multiply that by 12 to see how much you're getting per year. And then we divide that yearly total into your initial investment of 100,000. So your return for cash flow that year is about 1.6, which rents go up typically every year. So just keep that in mind that this might be kind of a beginning stage, or this might even be negative going into it. But you'll see here in just a minute that this is our smallest percentage of return. So next we talk about appreciation. You make money on real estate based on appreciation. And this is why when you study, if you ever study up on millionaires, billionaires, the richest people in the United States, majority of their assets are some type of real estate. It's either commercial or residential real estate. And this is why your money grows at so much more of a rapid pace, because of appreciation and how it works. So see how our initial investment was 100,000. Our homes appreciate month over month, year over year, off of the $400,000 purchase price rather than the 100,000. So if you were to go put $100,000 into the stock market, it would grow based on that 100,000. It doesn't grow at a higher rate, where real estate, you grow at the higher rate. So a $400,000 purchase, we are using small numbers. This is a 3.5% growth year over year. So we're going to say a 3.5% growth, which if you were in real estate over the last 2 to 3 years, that was probably closer to 15 to 20% growth. So we're using very simple numbers here. 3.5 equals 14,000 a year. And then we divide that 14,000 into our initial investment of 100,000. That was our cash out of pocket, right? To get into this property. That's a 14% return on appreciation only, right? Next, we get to talk about depreciation, which you can claim on your taxes. So you cannot depreciate the value of land. You only depreciate the property itself. So that's why instead of the 400,000, we took $100,000 out to just assume that that was our price of the land, which again, this is going to be a case-by-case basis, but this is just to give you simple numbers. So we take the 300,000 and we divide that by 27.5 years, because you can depreciate for 27.5 years on an investment property. That is 10,909, and we're multiplying that by our tax bracket of 22%. So again, this is going to be based on your personal tax bracket. That's 2,400, and then we take that 2,400 and divide that back into your initial investment of 100,000, and that gives you a 2.4% return on your 100,000. Okay, and then the last one is principal pay down. So when we talk principal pay down, we're only looking at that principal amount at the very beginning. So $245.91, which, if you're familiar with the way that a mortgage works, you pay the smallest amount of principal on month one of your, if you've ever looked in the amortization schedule, you'll notice that month one is the very smallest principal amount that you pay. And then year over year, month over month, that grows to be bigger. So this is showing you numbers based on worst case scenario. So month one, $245.91 times 12 for the year. So $2950.92, and you divide that into 100,000. This is how much they're paying down on your principal that year, it's a 2.9% return, which that is wrong, sorry. So we're roughly, I don't know why that number is wrong. I think we changed the rate on this a while ago and that number is wrong. So I'll fix that for you. But even with that, we're 20% return, which how many of you are getting 20% return on your 401k right now? Or in stocks, right? So this is such a great way to understand that cash flow is the smallest amount and it's not the only way that we make money. So now I want to talk to you about even better scenario. You buy a property, which this is the strategy that I tell people. If you have an interest in building a real estate portfolio, buy it as a primary, live in it, because you only have to put 5% down if you're buying a property as a primary residence. You're going to live in it for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever works for you. You're going to vacate that property, turn around and buy another primary residence. But I wanted you guys to see the numbers here based on if you were to buy it as a primary first. So as you can see, we only have a $20,000 initial investment on a $400,000 purchase because it's only 5% down versus 25% down. And we have negative cash flow vacating that property, right? So our negative is 15.8% negative, but our appreciation, since we only had a $20,000 initial investment, is 70%. Depreciation, again, only works if it's an investment property. So this would be as if you bought it as a primary, turned around, vacated the property, and are now using it as an investment. And then your principal pay down again. So, I mean, look at that return, 88%, sign me up, right? Most people would say, sign me up, because if I put $20,000 into a stock account, even if everybody says it's the best account ever, you're likely not going to get an 88% return on that. So
hold on, but that's really quite variable on how long you hold the house.
Yes, it is. It is. It definitely is. And that's why I always preach to buy and hold long-term, because that is when you see your biggest return. Because when you think about it, coming back to here, once there is no principal and that house is paid off, or, you know, because right now in my property alone, we bought it my investment property. We bought it in the year 2000, which was a great time to buy. It was $100,000 property, but I mean, again, thought it was a high amount. Oh my gosh, this mortgage is expensive. But the cool part about real estate too, is we've been able to leverage that property in other ways to acquire more properties, which again, diversifies and helps you grow your wealth. So, and then once it's paid off, that's a complete cash flow. My cash flow skyrockets at that point. There is no principal pay down. So there's just, I agree with, yes, this is variable based on how long you own the property, but what we preach is to buy and hold long-term. And if you're not, then absolutely look into doing a 1031 exchange. If you do have a property that is an investment, you will pay capital gains on that property if you haven't lived in it for 2 of the last 5 years. So we're not going to get too deep into a 1031 exchange right now, but there are ways to defer those taxes that you might have to pay on an investment. So, okay, so when to buy? Let's talk about when to buy. When is a good time to buy? 20 years ago. I think I talk to people that are like, we sold in 2019 thinking it was the tip top. What are those people saying right now? Holy crap, I should have waited, or I should have held on to my property. Or people that bought, even me buying in 2000, I bought in 2019 and I did think it was expensive. I'm like, there is no way this house will ever be worth more than this. And sure enough, my equity growth is substantial. So that's why I tell people to buy when you can. If you find a good property, buy when you can. I have had conversations which those return on investment numbers didn't take into account like condos and townhomes with your homeowners association dues, because that eats into those figures, right? It eats into your return. But there's pros and cons to owning a property with an HOA if it is an investment property. So even if it's a lower end price, because that's what you can get into now, you still are going to have a decent return based on the other factors. Oh, my mouse is going way too fast. So this is to give you guys an idea of monthly house price index from 1991 till this was last updated September 2022. So the thing that I like to mention is I mean, there's little dips here and there, right? Like you see little fluctuations here and there. This is obviously our big dip in 2008. From 2008 to really, I mean, they're saying we didn't really recover from that until about 2016. But when you think about equity growth and you think about that appreciation and even where house prices are, if that didn't ever happen and you continue to see this trajectory as though that wasn't there, I mean, it's looking as though we're kind of aligned with where we should be. I remember my mom telling me, oh my gosh, I had no idea. They owned a home in California. And we always say like, California's so expensive, right? We all say that living here in Utah. And I believe that we're kind of mimicking what their housing market has done, because we have seen year over year just house prices go up, and people keep saying, oh, drop at 40%. Yeah, probably not going to happen. But the cool part is my mom was like, I'm going to look and see what my house would be worth, because she thinks her parents bought it for like $70,000 and it was in Fresno, California. And sure enough, it sold for like $2 million. Like, I think it was maybe a year or two ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but really that's some of the growth that we've seen here too, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into our equity growth. There's a lot of factors that go into, you know, house prices and all of that. Inflation has a big factor to do with what rates are doing right now. And I know that's a big, scary factor for people right now. But like I said earlier, it is so much easier for you to time a refinance than it is for you to, I mean, you could watch rates on a daily basis to refinance a property once you already have it, versus trying to get in at the right time when everybody else realizes it's also the right time. There's no competitive offers. There's, you know, all the factors that come into real estate. So, do you have the same same chart just for Utah? I don't, but I'll find one for you and get one sent to you, Robert. That's a great question. Okay, so strategies. I love to talk strategy because it's great to talk about how incredible it is to invest in real estate, but how? Some of the time people are like, well, how do I get started? Or how do I acquire more properties? I want to build a portfolio. What does that look like? So this is a huge suggestion for someone that you might know that is, you know, in their younger years, or they have a really small family. Because I honestly feel like the smartest thing a young person can do with their first property is to buy a multi-unit that is up to 4 units, and they can go FHA. But if they live in the home, they're going to live in one of the 4 units. They can get in with as little as 3.5% down. These are a little bit hard to find. I think that there's fewer and fewer multi-units that you can find like this. But it's a great opportunity. You buy it as a primary, you live in it for a year, you can then vacate that 1 unit that you've been living in and turn around and buy another primary residence. Another strategy would be to buy a home that has a basement or accessory dwelling unit attached, or in the, you know, basement, or it's attached somewhere to the property. You can save the income from that and put that towards, because you obviously need to qualify for the home. There is a new program actually that just came out last fall that allows you to use the accessory dwelling income unit to help you qualify. But this example is telling you if you just qualified for the home on your own, but you rented out either rooms, which is the next tip, you either rent out rooms or your basement or something like that, just pocket all that money and put it aside to use that for a down payment on the next property. If you're single, obviously renting out rooms, this is called house hacking. Some people even do this for Airbnbs. They'll have like a room with a bathroom set aside that they let people come rent if they're in the area for a couple of days. Always remembering this is a long-term investment. Don't try to buy, turn around and sell super fast, because yeah, there's some of those that probably did buy in 2020 and sold in 2022 and made a big portion, but that's fewer and far between. And your growth long-term is going to be your best growth and your best return. You can team up with other investors. The most common one I see with teaming up with other investors is, especially if you have friends or family that you guys absolutely enjoy going and vacationing to the same areas. Team up and buy a property, a second home somewhere that you could either rent out occasionally to other people, or that you just want as a second property to go and visit, but it's great to have another home that's yours. 25% down is typically the best route to go when it goes, if you're buying a property that is strictly investment purposes. There are 10 and 20% down options, but the rates and closing costs for those options are out of this world expensive. So it really is better for you to be able to go with 25% down. And then the thing I like to talk about with cash purchases is some people will come to us, and I say us because I'm with a team, and my team and I are always teaching classes together, so it's more normal for me to say us. But when people come to us and say, hey, I just acquired X amount of dollars. So let's say that they had someone pass away or they won the lottery, I don't even know, right? But there are people that suddenly have a big lump sum of money. And they ask, is it better for me to go buy one property in cash? Because then obviously you don't have to worry about a mortgage, and it's less risky maybe, and you have 100% cash flow because there's no mortgage. However, this is where we talk a lot about diversifying, because if you are better off as far as long-term growth, and if we're in a strong rental market, which Utah is, and those rates continue to go up year over year, which is a big point for people to buy houses right now because they're sick of rent going up, is to put 25% down on multiple properties, because you're having, maybe you can buy 3 properties that are each worth $300,000 because of the money you just received, instead of buying one. Now you have appreciation on 3 separate properties of $300,000. So your money is growing at a much more rapid pace, and by diversifying that cash. So, and that's definitely a case-by-case basis, especially if there's any risk there, if you're worried about certain things with your money. But anyway, so I do like to share some advice and tips that I have for people that are becoming landlords themselves. And I had to learn some of these things the hard way, to be completely honest with you, but good reference is to ask for previous landlords' advice and experience on what this current person that's trying to rent from you, what their situation was like. Do not ask their current landlord. Maybe you want to ask their current landlord, that's fine, but make sure you ask the previous and maybe even the previous before that, because if the current landlord cannot wait to get rid of these people, they are going to tell you that they are absolutely amazing and that you should let them live in, you should let them live in your property because they are just the best. And then you find out, oh my gosh, they totally lied to me because they cannot wait to get rid of these people, which that's the family I had to evict, unfortunately. Find out, how are they paid? You could prorate their rent if you wanted. There's just different strategies with that. But I want to move on to knowing your city code. This is really becoming, it's more restrictive. If let's say you buy a property that does have an accessory dwelling unit, there's a lot of cities that don't allow you to rent out. So let's say my house, I buy my house, the basement has its own rental and I rent out the basement. Well, most cities are requiring the owner to actually live in the property. And I know that there's times and ways that you can get around that, but just know that there's some risk involved with that if you do vacate and rent the top as well, because then like a duplex, right, type situation. The other thing is that I know I've been on a couple of attended a couple of panels with some of the Utah, they specialize in short-term rentals, and there is a lot of city codes and cities that are cracking down on short-term rentals. And some cities are flat out not allowing short-term rentals. There's some HOAs as well that will just flat out not allow. I think that there are some workarounds, but again, you might get in trouble if you don't know what you don't know and you don't know that going in. So I definitely suggest if that's one of the situations you're working, or if you have a client you're working with that wants to buy a short-term rental, make sure you know the city codes and make sure that they're good to go before you jump into some random city that isn't allowing them right now. If you don't want much involvement, hire a property management company. This has been game changer for me. Number one, I told you I'm an emotional person. I love relationships, so I'm invested in people. And I had a family that was renting from us, and they were such incredible people. And they had some really, really hard things come up while they lived in our property. And I just flat out was like, I can't charge them rent. Like, this is terrible. I feel awful, but I wasn't running my property like a business. So I love the fact now that there's a separation there. I also have more tax write-offs because she's better keeping my property up to date. She makes sure that the maintenance is done that needs to be done, where I didn't ever want to bother people before. I never raised rent before because I was like, that is so rude. But now that my property manager does all of that for me, I have benefited way more over these last 2 years of having a property management company than I ever did before. Having a good loan officer and agent on your team is absolutely crucial, and understanding what you're getting into, what your options are. Running the ROI on your exact situation could be super beneficial for you to see what this might look like in the long term. Beware of HOAs. They do affect your profit margins and the types of rentals that you might be able to have. The one thing I like to mention on those HOAs too is, especially for short-term rentals, there's a lot of areas in southern Utah that they're specific to short-term rentals, right? But you'll pay probably a 35% of your gains to the HOA because they basically manage it for you. So just be aware of that, because it's not as simple as like, oh, my property management company takes 8 to 10%. Some of them are 35 to 45%. Investing is not a get rich quick. I say that multiple times because I really want people to understand we are teaching to hold properties long term. Having reserves is a really, really, really beneficial thing for you to have. The other part of having reserves is it's typically required if you, like, let's say Robert comes and he wants to get a mortgage from me. Even if he's buying an investment property, he has the down payment and all of that. If he has other investment properties, the loan itself, in order for him to qualify, is going to require that he has reserves on top of his down payment and closing costs, because they look at that as a risk mitigation factor. And they want to make sure that if you do have renters that aren't paying, that you have the funds to cover the mortgages. It's typically a 6 month of your principal and interest that they want you to have held aside. And they'll allow like a 401k or things like that to be proof of reserves. But this is just helpful. I mean, reserves are always a good thing. I have a separate account that my rents go into. It's not touched, and that money is strictly for the rental property. A good rule of thumb, which this is why I love property management, because this was not me before, is you can typically raise rents about 3% every year, which I know that your renters are going to hate that, but this is why you're the investor, and this is why you are the person that is the landlord instead of the renter, right? So I always suggest being so cautious about renting to friends and family. I think it just gets really messy, and that's where you're really going to have issues with people pulling at your heartstrings because this, that, or the other happened, and it can just really affect family relationships. And then never sell unless you're going to buy a replacement property. One of the strategies with never selling is that we do have some clients that are kind of in their older years, they're in their retirement ages, and they do have a nice portfolio of homes, but they're wanting to avoid, you know, the capital gains that they would have to pay on these properties by selling them. And they aren't in a place where they want to sell and diversify and buy more properties. So what they've committed to doing is they're going to sell and go live in the property for 2 years, and sell and go live in the next property for 2 years. So they made sure as they acquired properties that they were homes they wanted to live in and homes in places that they enjoyed being. And so that is a good strategy. If you do, you know, get to those older years and decide that you want to sell, but you're wanting to avoid that capital gain situation because you have to have lived in it for 2 of the past 5 years to avoid those capital gains. So that is really the end of today's presentation for you guys. Is there any questions that I'm going to stop the share so I can see you guys a little bit bigger. Is there any questions, comments, anything like that? I know that you said to find that chart for Utah alone, and yes, I will do some homework on that and find that for you. But was there anything else that I could answer for you guys? Did it make sense? My mouth gets so dry when I teach.
That was very helpful. Thank you. You said you will email out the recorded.
Yes, I can email you the
video, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you okay if I share that with some of my clients?
Yes. Yep. That's just fine.
Okay,
Are there
great.
any
Thank you so
specifics
much for your
out of-
time.
Oh, yes, thanks so much, Elsa. And I really appreciate your comment earlier about evictions. That's super helpful. Because I know that's a big fear for people, especially when the government
Yeah.
tells you something and they just get totally scared that it's impossible, right? Are there
Right.
any specifics? Robert said, is there any specifics for out-of-state investors? So Robert, are you meaning out-of-state wanting to buy properties here in Utah?
Correct.
We deal with a lot of those. That's super common here because of, I mean, I think, honestly, I don't know why it is so common here. I think it's mostly because of how diverse our job economy is here. And people realize that there's good equity growth here. And especially you notice, I'm sure a lot of you guys noticed over the past 2 years that there were cash buyers from California left and right, and they were buying cash here because to them, our market is super, super affordable, but they also see that our equity growth is happening at the pace that it happened in California. So that's just I mean, I don't know that I necessarily have advice, but I do think Utah's a great place to invest. I'm the type of person that wants to invest in areas that I know that it's, oh, sorry, can you go on?
Family
Sorry,
insurance.
guys, I'm at home tonight with my kids and thanks, bud, can you open the door? Anyways, I think Utah's a great place to invest. I think that I would recommend like knowing the areas, knowing, I mean, there's certain places in Utah I wouldn't invest, right? And I'm sure you're the same way, but I think honestly, you can't go wrong with the majority of the areas, especially across the Wasatch Front, in investing.
So Park City has a premium for property taxes for people who don't live there full time. Are they
Yes.
the only people or are more talking about it?
I
Park
think
City's a
St.
weird
George
one.
is talking about it.
Who is?
I
They
think
just
St.
talking
George is
about it.
talking about it. That's my understanding. I think I heard that same comment about St. George. I'll ask one of my agents down there, but I think that comes down with all of these restrictions that you're starting to see with the cities as far as like not allowing short-term rentals and things like that. I think that there's prestige neighborhoods, especially in Park City, that they don't want just random people living in their neighborhood for a week or living in their, so they're cracking down on stuff like that. And St. George is the same way. So I don't see that really happening. I mean, maybe some cities in Salt Lake, but I'm not surprised by that comment about Park City, but I think I've heard about that in St. George, but I'll find out for sure for you.
Okay, cool.
Because but I mean, even still, most out-of-state investors think that our property taxes are pretty affordable. I mean, I have a sister who lives in New York State. She's not in the city, and her property taxes every year are like $25,000.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe
Anybody who
that?
lives there deserves it. So
Oh,
sorry, Daisy.
right?
So,
You
sorry.
chose it. No, so I think ours are quite affordable for the most part. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
in most areas, I guess, right? Besides Park City.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I appreciate your comments and everything. I appreciate it. And if you guys have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me, okay?
Sounds good. We'll probably drop you an
Okay.
email here soon, and that way we have a connection.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thank you guys and have a great night.
So
Thank
can
you.
I ask one more question,
Yes,
Sam?
please.
So in terms of out-of-state investors, so
Mhm.
the process of applying mortgage is the same as local people, or are there
Yeah.
anything specific?
There's nothing different besides if they don't want to sign in person, we would just send a mobile notary, and that's typically how we do it. So you would just need to plan on probably 3 extra days by the time we schedule the mobile notary. It's so the title companies who schedules that, and they would just have a person go to their property or meet them somewhere. They would sign all the documents and then it's overnighted back to us here. But that's it. I mean, everything's done for the most part online anymore. So that's really the only thing that's different.
Hmm,
Cool.
good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple for, out-of-staters, which I appreciate that it's gotten to that point instead of all the paper stuff. You know what I mean?
Mhm, yep.
Great question.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes, thank you.
thanks for the time sharing. With us.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. Have a good night, you guys.
You're welcome.
You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.